At the stroke of midnight, the gears of government ceased. The lights dimmed, the doors locked, the halls fell silent. In that moment, America's government shut down, and millions of lives hung in the balance. Tonight, we are standing at the edge of a precipice. The United States has entered a government shutdown. No budget, no spending authority, no compromise, just a full stop. But this isn't just political theater. This is real life, and it will affect your job, your paychecks, your access to services, and the very stability of our nation. Over the next hour, we'll walk you through exactly how we got here, what's shutting down, who's hurt, and, most importantly, what comes next. Stay with me, because nothing less than democracy itself is on the line. How we got here. 1. The budget process and why failure matters. To understand a shutdown, you first must understand how the federal budget works. Every year, Congress is supposed to pass 12 appropriations bills, funding key areas like defense, homeland security, health, education, and more. The president signs them. The federal government has a legal authority to spend. If that process fails, whether due to gridlock, partisan dispute, or ideological standoff, the government lacks authority to pay most civilian employees and operate many programs. In recent decades, shutdowns have become political leverage. The threat of withheld pay and shuttered services becomes a bargaining chip. But for the people working within the system and the millions who rely on it, the consequences are real. 2. The current political landscape. Let's rewind to the present. A divided Congress, razor-thin margins, a president set on certain priorities, an opposition determined not to yield. Amid negotiations over spending caps, policy riders, such as immigration reform, climate funding, or social services, and debt ceiling concerns, one side refused to bend. And so, failing to strike a deal, we defaulted to the worst-case scenario, a shutdown. Leaders on both sides traded blame. Some argued that raising certain funding levels was reckless. Others insisted that spending cuts were unacceptable. As the clock ran out, compromise gave way to brinkmanship, and diplomacy failed. 3. Precedents and comparisons. America has walked this path before, most recently in 2013 and 2018 to 19. In those standoffs, federal parks closed, tens of thousands of workers were furloughed, and economic costs mounted into the billions. We don't have to guess how bad it can get. We've seen it, and this shutdown threatens to eclipse them in severity and duration. What gets shut down and what doesn't one? The essential versus non-essential distinction. When a shutdown hits, not all agencies or services close entirely. The federal government uses designations. Essential services continue. Non-essential services are halted. Let me walk you through what typically stays open and what typically goes dark. Essential services that must continue. National security, military personnel remain on active duty. The FBI, CIA, and parts of Homeland Security stay operational. Air traffic control, airlines still fly. Oversight continues. Border security, customs, and immigration enforcement in many but not all cases. Social security, Medicare, Medicaid payments, these belong to mandatory funding or entitlements. Postal service, largely self-funded. Some healthcare operations, e.g., VA hospitals, some critical public health functions. Debt interest payments and other obligations the government cannot legally default on. Non-essential services, likely to pause. Several regulatory agencies, e.g. EPA, financial regulators, may have reduced capacity or full shutdowns. National parks, museums, and public monuments often close. certain social programs, grant processing, and administrative reviews. Veteran and public benefits offices may be understaffed or limited. Internal operations, hiring, audits, oversight, internal support services. Notably, many shutdowns result in massive furloughs. Federal employees are put on unpaid leave until the impasse ends. 2. The human impact. Federal workers and contractors. One of the most visible consequences is for federal employees. Workers in agencies like the IRS, EPA, NASA, and many more get furloughed. Their paychecks vanish, but bills and obligations don't. Contractors, often not covered by the essential carve-outs, may lose income entirely until the shutdown ends. Expect ripple effects. Cafeterias in federal buildings close, building services get cut, customer support centers go dark. Cities near Washington, D.C., which rely heavily on federal worker spending, may see downturns in local commerce. 3. Slower government, delayed services, and economic drag. Even the agencies that remain operational will feel the squeeze, with diminished staffing, processing times for visas, permits, regulatory reviews, and grants slow dramatically. New government initiatives stall. Oversight, audits, and enforcement get sidelined. The private sector, contractors, researchers, and businesses dependent on federal programs suffers. Then there's the macroeconomic impact. Consumer confidence wavers. Investors fret. Hotels, restaurants, and retailers near federal hubs see less foot traffic. If the shutdown drags on, GDP takes a hit. Forecasts estimate billions of dollars lost per week. The longer the impasse, the deeper the wound. Who gets hurt and who is protected? 1. Low-income, vulnerable populations. Though many safety net programs are mandatory or otherwise protected, some discretionary but critical support systems risk disruption. For example, community health clinics, funded by grants that may expire, nutrition programs, housing initiatives, and education support that rely on annual funding. Local governments and non-profits that depend on federal grants may find their own budgets upended. When government programs falter, private charities are overwhelmed, but they can't fully fill the gap. 2. Businesses and the private sector businesses that interact with federal contracts, permits, or grants find their operations frozen. Infrastructure projects may be delayed. Companies waiting on approvals, whether for environmental permits, federal loan guarantees, or regulatory sign-offs, face uncertainty. Credit markets may stiffen if confidence erodes. Even industries far removed from government work feel the ripple. Wall Street reacts. Retail sales slump in cities hosting large federal presences. Travel and tourism around protected sites collapse. 3. The broader public and psychological tremors. Every citizen is impacted, even if indirectly. Delays in passport processing, agency responses, regulatory oversight, and scientific funding may affect your life. The longer the shutdown endures, the more nationwide services weaken, from disease control to conservation efforts to infrastructure maintenance. Furthermore, public trust in government frays. When citizens see their elected representatives squabble while essential functions stop, cynicism grows. The legitimacy of institutions becomes a casualty. Let's look at the possible trajectories and outcomes. The shutdown could be resolved swiftly, dragged out for weeks, or linger for months. Each path carries its own dangers. Scenario A. Short-term shock, 1 to 2 weeks. Quick deal forged at the last minute. Furloughed workers return, agencies resume operation. Some damage done. The morale hit, backlog of work, delayed benefits. But recovery is manageable. Political fallout is strong. Media coverage, public outrage, blame games. Scenario B, medium-term collapse, 3 to 6 weeks. Backlogs mount. Agencies struggle to catch up. Services remain spotty. Some states or localities scramble to fill gaps, for example, providing unemployment support locally. Economic effects deepen. Supply chain delays, uncertainty discourages investment. Federal employees may begin skipping rent, missing payments. Social distress accelerates. Scenario C, long-term catastrophe, 2+ months. Government functions degrade sharply. Agencies begin defaulting on internal contracts, cutting critical operations, even within essential ranks. State and local governments absorb operations, but can't do so indefinitely. Financial markets tremble. Credit rating agencies may downgrade U.S. debt. Borrowing costs spike. International partners, allies, and adversaries grow apprehensive. The U.S. image of stability erodes. Worst case, we tumble into a partial fiscal crisis where the government must choose between debt payments and some base services, an unthinkable, destabilizing choice. What's at stake? National security, economy, democracy. 1. National security and global standing. When intelligence agencies, military readiness, border security, and diplomacy operate under constant uncertainty, our national posture weakens. Weakened morale, delayed contracts, unpaid defense contractors. These are vulnerabilities adversaries may exploit. Foreign governments watch closely. If Washington appears unable to govern itself, confidence in U.S. commitments abroad falters, from NATO obligations to trade deals and security pacts. 2. The economic toll. As I mentioned, each week of shutdown costs the U.S. economy billions, measuring in lost productivity, delayed spending, and shaken confidence. Every industry touched by federal operations is stressed. Long supply chains tethered to federal contracts may unravel. Investment slows, hiring freezes may spread, and financial markets may respond violently. 3. The legitimacy of government and the fabric of democracy. Democracy depends on the idea that government works. Citizens elect representatives to solve problems, manage services, and protect the public good. When those representatives stand idle while critical functions cease, people lose faith. A shutdown is a breach of the social contract. If this becomes routine, cynicism deepens. Voter turnout may shift. Political radicalization may grow. The institutions designed to buffer chaos falter. Possible paths to resolution, and their challenges. 1. Short-term continuing resolution, CR. This is the most common fallback. Congress passes a stopgap funding measure, temporarily continuing current spending levels while negotiations resume. It's a band-aid, not a solution. It buys time, but delay only postpones the fight. 2. Tiered or partial funding deals. Often, Congress may agree to fund essential agencies or those under national security first, leaving others unfunded until consensus. But this invites more conflict. Many lawmakers resist selective funding as unfair or politically biased. 3. Grand bargain. In theory, both sides might reach a full appropriations bill or omnibus package that resolves all issues, spending levels, policy riders, reform demands. But that requires compromise. The very thing some factions have refused. The longer negotiations drag, the more entrenched positions become. 4. Unilateral moves. In extreme scenarios, the president may attempt to reallocate funds, declare emergencies, or issue executive orders to bypass Congress. This raises constitutional battles, lawsuits, and questions of legality. 5. Public and political pressure. Ultimately, public outrage, media pressure, protest, and political risk might force Resolution. When campaign season looms or re-election fears mount, leaders may back down or capitulate to avoid the blame. Strategies for mitigation. What can be done to soften the blow? 1. Emergency state-level bridging states could temporarily fund certain services, though budgets are already tight. Local governments may assist furloughed workers via vouchers, grants, or services, but such patches are limited. 2. Private and non-profit sector relief charities, religious organizations, and non-profits may step in, helping displaced federal workers and vulnerable populations, but they are often under-resourced. The scale of need may overwhelm them. 3. Workforce support programs, unemployment benefits, or emergency relief from the Department of Labor, if funded, may help furloughed workers. But delays in claim processing or inadequate funds limit effectiveness. 4. Legal protections. Some states or municipalities might pass protections to prevent evictions, utility shutoffs, or foreclosures against affected employees. Indeed, local governments might institute moratoria to ease hardship. 5. Communication and accountability. Federal agencies can prioritize transparency, notifying impacted employees, contractors, and the public. Clear communication reduces fear, confusion, and panic. Political leaders should commit to regular updates and schedules to restore trust. What you need to know and what you can do. 1. If you are a federal employee or contractor, monitor your status, essential or non-essential, furloughed or working without pay. Know your rights. Typically, once the government reopens, you'll be paid retroactively, though timing matters. Budget accordingly. Cut discretionary spending. Postpone non-urgent commitments. Seek emergency assistance from community or non-profit sources where available. 2. If you rely on federal services or grants plan for delays in processing, funding, and services, contact your agencies. Many provide limited operation or communications even in shutdown. Seek backup options where possible, state, local, or private alternatives. 3. For business owners and contractors, prioritize projects that don't depend on federal contracts or funding. Diversify revenue streams away from government dependency. Manage cash reserves and delay expansion decisions pending clarity. 4. For every citizen, be aware of delayed government functions, visa processing, regulatory reviews, public health services. Reach out to your representatives. Demand accountability, pressure for resolution. Support furloughed workers in your community, locally and in federal roles. Stay informed. As the legislature acts, developments can shift quickly. Why this shutdown matters. Think back to that opening moment. The lights go out, the doors lock. Government, the invisible architecture holding society together, pauses. That's not hyperbole. The government is a foundational institution. When it stalls, everyday life trembles. This isn't just politics. It's your ability to rely on the air traffic system, your social security check, your health services, your passport renewal, or your small business grant. A shutdown unravels not just budgets, but confidence in institutions, in leadership, in the social compact. The danger: if these shutdowns become normalized, we risk edging toward a failed state. The notion that government works sometimes becomes the default, not the exception. But there's hope. American institutions are resilient when people demand it, when pressure builds, when citizens refuse to accept stagnation, leaders are forced to act. History shows that shutdowns end. But the question is, how long, how painful, and at what cost? This is not just Washington's battle, it's yours. It's the fight for whether government serves citizens or citizens serve politics. Over the coming days and weeks, we'll be watching, analyzing, investigating. We'll bring you the decisions, deadlines, behind-the-scenes negotiations, and human stories. If you believe government should be functional, fair, and accountable, now is the time to act. Call your representative. Demand they break the deadlock. Urge them to prioritize people over posturing. Share stories from furloughed workers, community members missing services, entrepreneurs stuck waiting. Together, we can force a resolution. Not tomorrow, not next quarter, but now.